welcome back. Another episode of Diametric Convergence. We're back another week, another episode coming back at you. I had a good time with this one. Just a little intro. We brought in our friend from the Psyche-Delic Podcast, Dawn Wallace. She was a great guest. Don't you think, Brandon?
Yeah, totally enjoyed this one, just like all the others. But it was great to get to know another podcaster freshly out the gate, but very knowledgeable and has been studying for years on other topics. And we relate very well as far as, just saw a need for podcasting in the positive light. Not that there isn't any already, but we feel like there needs to be a lot more, and we wanted to be part of that change, I feel.
Yep, definitely. I think this one is full of very positive conversation.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff to do with energies and interacting with the world around us. And again, health and wellness which is one of our overarching themes from episode to episode, just because we want people to be well and understand that their minds are where is really important to get well. So,
yeah. And we even dive deeper into the topic of aliens. So definitely stay tuned for that part.
That was a fun part. Yeah.
And the whole conversation was very enlightening and definitely a pleasure to have her on. So we should probably get right to it. And here she is.
How you doing?
Good. Welcome
Brandon?
back. Welcome back. I'm good. Dawn, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you on the 9th episode of Diametric Convergence. Can you please tell everybody a little bit about you and what your background is and, where you're from?
Well, I'm a little bit from everywhere, guys. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. I was born in Germany as an army brat, but I spent my summers in India with my family and then subsequently moved to the United States, to the South, in North Carolina. So I'm really from a little bit of everywhere, and have a bachelor's in cultural anthropology with a minor in professional writing. And I was a journalist for about 6 years in a small town and then later in a city. And so I've learned a lot about people, and I've also learned a lot about the spiritual aspect of people because I come from a very spiritual background as a Hindu. And so I've learned a lot of energy healing techniques and things like that. And I've had a lot of mystical experiences, a lot of psychedelic experiences. And a lot of my friends refer to me as a shaman. So that's kind of what I call myself now, even though I really feel like I don't belong in any one specific box per se.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's hard to call yourself a shaman, but it's cool when other people do, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's super amazing. It seems like you have a wide array of knowledge and from different places, which is really cool.
Yeah, a lot of different places.
Heck yeah. So you're doing a podcast now with a few of you. Are they your friends or just co-hosts? Did you know them from before? And what is your podcast called and what's it about?
So we are the Psyche-Delic Podcast, and that's Psyche-Delic Podcast. And we delve into the psyche. We talk a lot about the human mind, human behavior, and how it affects our world and our society. And I actually was invited to join as a co-host by Tina, and Tina and I have been friends for a very long time. And she decided to start this podcast at the beginning of, I guess, the COVID lockdown, when she was trying to have these deep conversations with people on Facebook, but she realized it was kind of one-sided. And so she decided to put together a panel of the most unique people she could think of within her circle. And now here we are. We're about 11, 12 episodes in, I don't actually know. Well, I'll say I didn't know the other hosts prior to the show. Rob is her husband. And then there's Chris, who she met in high school, and Nico, whom she met in either elementary school or middle school. I'm not sure, but they lived in Korea together. So
Wow.
we've all been all over the place. We've traveled. Most of us are military or, army brats, as they say. So we have this like really vast cultural knowledge among all of us because we've traveled so much and we've seen so much of the world just in a short amount of time, because we're all relatively the same age in our late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
A lot of history. That's cool.
And I think we saw the same type of thing. People were fighting all the time on Facebook, and even Andrew and I don't have the same beliefs, but we just had a conversation and we talked it out, and then came out the other side and just believed we were better after that conversation. And Andrew and I have known each other since third grade, so we've kind of separated and now came back, and we're talking about all these fun topics, and it's really exciting to hear everybody's different perspectives. And I think you guys are doing a really great thing over there. I've listened to a few of your episodes, and you're bringing on smart people and talking through these things, and I feel like there was a wave of new podcasters that came out there, and maybe coming from this same like energy, and we all just decided we need to spread love instead of hate.
Yeah, we really lost. Yeah, we really lost like the procedure of discourse. Like, people aren't having conversations anymore. It's all just snippets and sound bites and people trying to one up each other. And I don't know. It's just it's gotten out of hand. And there's there's not enough people having a conversation and listening to each other and sharing ideas and understanding that we come from different backgrounds, but we all kind of still want the same basic things. So I think that's really been lost these days.
Yeah,
for sure. There's a lack of interconnection and interpersonal relationships because like the internet is really great and everything, and we've met people all over the world, and we can talk to thousands of people with the same energy that we used to put into just talking to one person. And for that aspect, it's cool, but there is this disconnect that I think, based on what you're saying, we might be growing through that now, where we're coming out the other side and we're trying to find a new way to become connected again. Because, I mean, in pastoral communities or just tight-knit communities or villages, you knew everyone so well. I mean, you knew them from, you grew up with them and you died with them, and you knew their children and everything that they ate and they did. But we don't really have that anymore.
Yeah.
So maybe this new wave of podcasters are really longing for forward motion into that reconnection.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
I just felt there's a push of people wanting to spread good information and real information. We're tired of just seeing the same news or the same people talking about the same things, and there's more to life than just sitting around arguing over stupid things. And here we sit trying to just be a better example for other people. We're not even trying to change anyone, because I know, as well as I'm sure you guys know, that we don't change anyone. We are examples, and that's how people learn. And so that's it's really cool. It's exciting times.
It's new times.
Yeah.
Even with like the whole internet, like the internet relatively I guess in terms of human history is brand new. It's just not something we've ever had to deal with before. It's very much of an unknown frontier, because like Dawn said before this, we just had the oral history type setting where people were in their, lack of a better term, tribes, and they were interconnected like that. But suddenly, you open that up to the internet's taking, like, just spreading out globally. It's kind of like a shell shock almost, and cultural shock. People don't really know how to deal with it yet, so we don't know how we want to deal with interacting with each other. We don't know how to go about that with being online, because most people have, at this point, will have the two different personas. One, their real life persona, and then their online persona. The online persona is much more freeing for a lot of people because there's no real accountability behind it. So they can go in and say whatever they think, and oftentimes have zero repercussions because of the anonymity. So I think that plays a big part in it too. And I think we're just forging kind of new frontiers and learning how to adapt to that. And I think that is what's kind of going on now. And part of the blessing of being in lockdown, people are kind of are forced to, like, recognize that and be with themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can use we've already used the internet as a tool to help us. And if we keep doing that and connect with the internet, then I think connected people are unstoppable.
Yep.
It's really interesting what you were saying about wanting to spread love, because I've kind of been seeing the internet as sort of an external mirror to what we have internally, where, internally, and we've gotten way, way away from this, but in your heart center, your heart chakra is the key to connecting to other humans. And when you're open there and you live more in your heart space than in your head space, you're able to connect to people on such a deep level that you can have these telepathic experiences and things like that. And I think that we came from there, and we used to do that a long time ago, but we've maybe forgotten how. And in the search for returning to that, we have created the internet, which is like the external version of that. It's not within our bodies per se, but it's sort of trying to do the same thing, right? Where we're trying to connect to other people and communicate with them through the internet. I think that's at least the internet's main purpose, besides cat videos. But I think what you're saying about spreading love through the internet and being tired of all the fighting and wanting that change for, let's say, the next generation. It's just, that's what we want inherently as people. When we're trying to do something better, it's because we want it for all of us and whoever comes next.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like a mirror.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We forgot how to use our special powers. That's what I always call them, like sixth sense, whatever. Like I do massage, and I know you do Reiki. It's a similar energy that we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as I, we don't do the work. We just teach people how to allow it. And
guiding, if anything.
Yeah. And you with Reiki, you're moving energy, doing symbols. I don't know Reiki yet, but I do work with energy, doing craniosacral, and it's very powerful when you have an energy shift. And when you're talking about the heart chakra, if you have these blocks in your heart, there could be a structural block that might be messing with your energies. So working with the structure and the energy is a really powerful thing, and you can have drastic changes overnight that might bring out drastic emotions, which is amazing and perfect at that time. Which is, sometimes you'll have SERs. Do you know what an SER is?
No, what is that?
SER is a somato-emotional release, and that's basically when your muscles release and you start crying, and you have just a total emotional sometimes breakdown, but it's releasing those fears and those toxic energy that you have in you, and you're basically just crying it out. And if you're giving someone a massage and they have this, you just basically, it's like you see someone else cry, you just go over there, you help them, ask them if you can do anything. You probably stop the massage because it might continue it if you keep going. So there's a lot of these tools that you can do, but working with energy is a very powerful thing, and you have to be very grounded to even attempt to do that. When you're talking about Reiki, I have an amazing Reiki teacher, master, that she said, you have to quit every substance before you do it, before you can become attuned. And I was like, wow, this is, tough work, but I believe it 100%. And that's why I haven't done Reiki yet, because I'm working on myself to get there. And I don't even want to attempt messing with energy if I'm not sound myself.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I didn't know that about SER. That's really cool. Even though I know what that is and what you're talking about, I've definitely experienced it and had that experience with my clients. I don't actually do Reiki. I say I don't practice it.
Okay.
Because I studied it, oh my gosh, probably 6 years ago. And then I went through some stuff, and then I actually sort of discovered my own healing modality relatively recently, where I knew what I was doing, but then it all kind of coalesced and became clear to me as to how to do it, because I knew that I had to do distance healing sessions, but I wasn't really sure how. And so I managed to figure out, how to intuitively tap into people's energy and rearrange things, pull out imagery, whatever it was, infuse my own energy into them. But it really only came after I cut out all mind altering substances.
Wow.
So it was definitely that was the catalyst for taking me to the next level as a healer.
Wow.
Because I was able to, it was really mind blowing. I have to say, no alcohol, no caffeine, no weed, nothing. Mm-hmm. And I can close my eyes and hear what music I need to be listening to. So I pull up that song, and the lyrics or the music itself, I don't know what it is about that. It makes me like trip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I can see inside this person's visual field. It's not really their visual field. It's more like their energy. I can see inside the energy.
Like their aura.
Yeah. Hang on one second. There's an alarm clock going off for some reason.
Yeah. I'm glad you're on top of it. You're making sure you're...
I was wondering, is that in my head or is that actually happening?
Sorry.
I know it's in the real world, not a tumor.
It's both. It's both, Andrew.
Not a tumor.
And now you guys know my life. No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, no substances is definitely the way to go, because now I can pretty much have the experience that I was having with the substances, but without them, and in a much more clear and focused way, where I can really hear myself. I can really, really hear other people, and I can hear the collective. Like, I guess you could say that I'm really sort of clairsentient, or what's the word for when you can hear it?
I don't know. You got me on that, but
it's really strong.
Yeah.
Clairaudience. That's what it is.
Okay.
I will hear a song from another country that I can't even translate. I can't even pinpoint it, and it'll get trapped in my hair. I have kind of long hair. And the music will get trapped there, and then every so often, if I'm moving my hair around, I'll hear it again, and it'll bug me, because it's not like the song isn't stuck in my head, it's stuck in my hair.
Oh, that's wild.
It's really weird.
Yeah.
Well,
that it's interesting.
Yeah, it's so you do a lot of distance stuff, is that correct? Or
Yeah, in this day and age, and it's like kind of it came out of the lockdown in a way because people were reaching out to me, and obviously I couldn't go to where they were. Plus I was living in Michigan, and it was usually like somebody from a different state or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't go to them obviously, but I can still connect to them very easily because time and space are not real, at least not the way we think. And so the energy just moves very easily, like from me to you. That's not a far away thing when it comes to energy. It's the same place.
Absolutely. And so what about people that say, oh, that's, I don't believe that. Will it work for them?
You know, I had that experience recently where somebody had a session with me, but it really felt like they were not receptive.
Right.
And so what happens is it becomes more of a counseling session where I tap into them and I hear what their deepest needs are, where the root of their pain is. And I try to guide my questions in such a way that I'm leading them to the answer. And maybe they don't see it right away, but a day or a week goes by and then the wheels start turning because they have these words in their head now and they have this different perspective. And the other thing is it allows me to be very blunt with them, where I normally wouldn't say that to, you know, a close friend or family member in the same way as I would say, oh, well, okay, well, you're making excuses for yourself, or you're not willing to see this the way that I'm trying to say. Let me try to find a different way to say it and tell me if you're hearing me right, you know.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear it, and that's part of it. And I think they have a part of themselves that's curious and they want to have some kind of healing experience or some kind of mystic experience or answers, but then they're so skeptical and judgmental that I have to show them that, look, you're really distrusting of yourself. It's not me, it's you.
True. And it's almost like a form of hypnotherapy in a way.
Yeah.
With them allowing it, it's never like you like trying to change their mind or twist them. It's them needing this. If it's not going to work if they never allow it, like at least for the most part, you have to be receptive to this type of healing. I believe in it 100% because I believe healing happens in the mind. And I'm a body work therapist, and I work deep. I do a deep work, trigger point type of stuff. But as I did that work, I realized more and more that I don't really have to hurt these people as much as they want me to. All I have to do, it's usually like that. And so, because they're like, it's so big, I need to get it out. I'm like, okay, but we need to work on the stuff that's creating this.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, we can work on that too. The big spot that has happened from 30 years of you living, but we need to stop what's creating it. And I think that's what you're working with on a deep level, and which is really amazing. And I think very powerful if people allow it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting you say about pressure points and stuff. That's how I started out as a child. You know, my mom would always want me to rub her feet. And I thought that she just wanted me to do it because I was good at it, and she told me I was good at it because I was her kid. But I started to realize that I was doing something completely different from the massage therapists that she was seeing. And I started to know, because she would just be there and I would just start rubbing her feet, and then all of a sudden I would reach over and press a spot on her knee, and she would go, "Oh, how did you know that hurt?" And I said, "I don't know. It hurts on me. Like, it's on an empathetic level where I can feel other people's pain." So I started to recognize that. And then I started to recognize too that I could tell based on her behavior where she was carrying her stress. And I could tell based on her muscles and how her feet felt, what kind of stress she was carrying. So I started to see these interrelated things between physical and emotional. Yeah. And then in Reiki, I learned that when you have something going on with you, it starts out as an emotion. It starts out as a vibration, and then it takes root in your body. And after a while, it becomes physical. So if somebody has, this is a terrible example probably, but has like a brain tumor or something, then you could maybe surmise that they have blockages in either their third eye or their crown chakra. Something is really imbalanced there, or maybe there is trauma in that area relating to how they see themselves or how they connect to their higher self or whatever it may be. So that's really interesting about the pressure points, because I'd really like to learn more, but I'm almost kind of scared to, because I'm worried that somebody else's expertise or what they say is expertise will taint my ability to find these things innately on my own.
Ah, that's a great point. And that's exactly how I learned, is finding them on myself. And also I worked with my mom as a young kid as well. She has fibromyalgia, so I learned on her. She taught me trigger point from another person. And trigger points are different than the energy center, but it's more like the muscle not working and it twisted up onto itself. So kind of like the bugs, roly-polies, and they roll up into a ball. That's where your muscle does, and that's what a knot is. So basically the blood gets trapped in there, and by holding it, you're tricking the muscle to release itself. You never want to go longer than 2 minutes, because then you do the opposite and create more lack of blood flow. So 2 minutes is the ideal place. But I think if you feel a spot that hurts, you can hold it for a couple minutes, or kind of hold that spot and kind of stretch your shoulder or stretch your leg, wherever it is. And I feel like the intuitive healing mind is the best mind. So in my opinion, every person, every individual knows what's best for themselves innately.
Yeah. Many people have forgotten how to hear it, or don't trust themselves to hear it, though.
Yeah, so true. And that's why we're here today. Yeah.
Yep.
Does that resonate with you, Andrew? Is that how, I mean, you know me, I was always telling you stuff like this, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like you said, Dawn, people are forgetting that they have the power to heal themselves inside. And we're always looking, oh, who can heal me? Who can save me? What person is the smartest and the best? Who has the best science? But really, if we just listen to ourselves, that's the best science, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. And I always go back to the sort of the paper cut or the scab as an example, because your skin is always healing itself. If you don't do anything, it's going to heal itself. So your body is constantly working to heal itself. I mean, look at your immune system, your white blood cells. We have enough science to know that that's why the placebo effect works, is because your body is always healing itself. So it blows my mind when people go from doctor to doctor looking for an external answer when the answer lies within.
Same. It's wild how much we trust people that keep us sick. Not all doctors. There's a lot of great ones, but
Big pharma.
yeah, that's the problem, right? Because they're making a bunch of money on keeping people sick. We've talked about this in a previous episode, and it's just wild. And that's why I went back to trying to heal myself. I always believed that since a young person, that I was going to find a way to help my back, because my back was in pain when I was young, scoliosis and all kinds of structural problems. And I just believed in myself, and then found out that I was actually doing massage before I even knew what it was. So that's believing in your innate abilities to heal yourself.
I think a lot of it's, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here, but I think a lot of it is propaganda too, where they're telling people that you should be listening to these experts, and they know better than you do because they're studying all this stuff and they've been spending their lives doing it, which I agree with to an extent, but I guess the point of the propaganda was just to only listen to them and not, include everything else. as a means to make big pharma more money, basically. Like they just, because they're all bought into that same program, and everybody kind of takes from that pot, and they're all have their hands in it. So like it doesn't make them any more money or as much money if people aren't relying solely on them. So after like over time, people forget that they do have this power, and that it's not just about what the doctors are telling you. Like, and they shouldn't just be the sole authority. Like, it should be like a consultative, collaborative endeavor that is taken on by both parties, where they work in tandem and not just a one-sided practice. I think that's
Agree.
kind of what has been going on. But it's, my argument will always, be to just follow the money, trace the money, see where the money is going, and you'll find the root of where it started and where it is going. So I think money has a huge play in, too big of a play in healthcare these days. It's just, like I said, the propaganda, they've used it to pretty much smear any other type of medicine that's not mainstream. So, I mean, if you like the stuff we're talking about right now, you bring that out into like a mainstream setting, and people are going to like look at you like you're this granola munching hippie who has no idea what they're talking about. That's just part of the plan. I think it's just to discredit all that stuff. So people have to rely on these like wildly expensive outlets and not themselves.
Yeah, Andrew, I totally agree with you. It's like whatever works, they don't want to tell you, because like, I'm biased with massage, but it does work.
Right.
Body work works. Getting blood to flow works. Now, getting elective surgeries and cutting off the blood flow and creating more scar tissue, in my opinion, doesn't work.
Right.
And you're saying exactly that. Like, they're holding down the stuff that might work better, like nutrition and body work, energy work.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's not to say like some of this stuff can't ever work. I mean, some of it works to an extent, but it shouldn't be used as the sole avenue people use to go down for healing. Like they need to do the whole body healing. Like, there's more to it than just physical, and start treating the cause and stop treating symptoms. Like, that's kind of what modern, mainstream medicine does. They treat symptoms. They don't treat the root cause.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there are very few physicians that will even admit to taking a holistic approach to a person in terms of evaluating their lifestyle to figure out the causes of their ailments versus just treating the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
They're scared to speak out on it. And I've seen YouTube videos that were like sensationalized and like, you're not going to believe what this doctor says. And all he's saying is that when he gets his patient in, he says, okay, what's going on in your relationships? How have you been eating? How have you been sleeping? Like, what's going on at work? Are you happy? Things that truly matter. We have more than just, one organ doing one thing. Everything is connected, and we have to see it that way, or it's just a detriment to ourselves.
Yeah, there's a new wave of functional medicine doctors. I was trying to find the word on a previous episode. I figured it out, and basically it's putting all those things together and looking at your nutrition, looking at your minerals and vitamins and all these things that play a huge role. And
but not just the physical either, right?
Yeah, no, also the mental,
spiritual, like everything that surrounds it, like energy. Like, I'm a huge proponent of energy. Like, I feel that everywhere I go. Like, that's why I like being in the company of people more often than being remote style, just because you don't get the same energy field as you can get from being in someone's presence. It's a lot easier to get to know somebody for me if I'm like around them and I can be there in the same kind of space as them.
That's really interesting. I find that I'm very opposite because I'm so sensitive to people's energy, and I'm still very impressionable as a person. So if someone is stressed out, I'll get stressed out very easily and not really understand why. So
Right.
it's difficult for me to be around a lot of people for extended period of time. Even my family, I have to withdraw very frequently and spend a lot of time by myself in nature. Otherwise, I start getting very depressed and confused, and I can't hear myself very clearly anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm a lot like you, Dawn. I've been realizing that if I don't have my alone time or a place to go, then it's like shaking a pop can. I'm gonna explode, and I've learned, and also just deplete all my energy. One time I was at a concert and we all took acid, and one of my friends was going in and out of consciousness basically, and he was breathing and everything, but it was like an alien entity. And I tried to like do some like grounding work on his feet, and it basically took all my energy. And the next day I was totally depleted. And I went to that Reiki master. Actually, I did some yoga nidra the next day, and I had a total breakdown, like an emotional breakdown. And this lady told me that I need to stay away from people for a while. She's like, get away from everyone. Don't even be around, because just that energy is so powerful to me that it could sway my mood so quickly. And if I don't withdraw, like you said, it's a different me.
I actually had a very similar experience, and I think it won't sound similar at first, but I think you're going to hear me.
Okay.
Where gosh, when was it? Very tail end of last year, I taught myself, or kind of discovered how to make these energy portals with my own energy. Because I was messing with my chi a lot, and I was doing that kind of thing, moving the energy around and expanding it, collapsing it, and I figured out how to expand it to where it became a portal, and then I could put things in this portal and send it off. So I would do full moon rituals where I would create a portal, what I would call a manifestation portal, pour my desires into it, close it, and send it out to the universe. And the first 2 times I did that, my arms the next day were in tremendous pain. I couldn't lift anything, like my food, my children. I was having a really hard time. And I started to consult with other energy workers about what was going on. And, I did it by posting in Facebook groups, because I thought, let me throw this question out to a whole variety of people. And I got a lot of ridicule and people telling me I was worshiping the devil and all this kind of just
Right.
negative stuff.
Super
But
fun pastime worshiping the devil. Yeah.
yeah. So I got some really good information, and I essentially learned that if I do any kind of energy work like that, I should tap into the energy of the earth and transfer the energy through my body to make something, so that I'm not depleting myself. I'm using myself as a conduit, essentially. And now it doesn't happen anymore. I don't get into that kind of pain anymore, because I've established the boundary of using my own energy for these things. And now I can feel more clearly when I'm using too much of my own energy, and I can switch it to, I can get energy from a plant now, if the plant will allow me to do that, or an animal, or the sky, or whatever. And it's helped a lot. I don't have that kind of pain experience anymore.
100%. I learned, I knew that because from massage, we don't use our energy. We're just allowing ourselves a conduit for source to do its thing. We're just the conduit. But when I was altered, I messed up. I was trying to use my power instead of what was way more powerful, which is source. And I forgot that in that split moment. And maybe it was a deep lesson that I needed to learn. But yeah, I definitely do that with massage. Like as I'm doing cranial sacral, not sure if you ever had it or not, but it's basically like working on the neck and the face and all the way down to the base chakra, the root chakra. But you just feel this energy that's definitely not you or not me, and that's when the powerful. It's almost like meditating or praying at the same time as your hands are doing the just being that bridge. It's really cool.
You would definitely like Reiki then. Reiki is very similar. It's just sort of a full body approach, and it sounds really similar. I've heard a little bit about cranial sacral, but I don't know much about it. And I have heard that the people that go to these sessions feel an immediate change. So I think that's really cool.
I feel like it messes with the third eye. Like it's almost like a DMT trip. Yeah, it's intense. Well, the first time I had it, it's very powerful. If anyone ever does get it, go to someone that pretty much knows what they're doing, because energy work is almost more powerful than body work, because you're tapping into that spiritual and you're allowing so much more when you're letting people into your energy field.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I love it.
Yep. Yeah, I just, for my part, I guess, like I don't know if there's anybody else who loves their alone time more than me as a lifelong introvert. I don't know. I love being by myself when I can. So don't get me wrong there. Like but I like being around people for certain things, just to, like I mentioned before, but because my job requires me to be around people, like new people constantly all the time now. Before, like I was very much to myself, and I didn't really like, I guess for a long time. But I think that was part of why I had my own breakdown earlier this year, is because I was just undergoing kind of a shift. I don't know if it was like an energy shift or just kind of, it was definitely a lifestyle shift. Just being in this position where I interact and, talk on a regular basis for extended periods of time, basically 8 hours a day I'm talking. Whereas the 34 years prior to that, wasn't really doing that. I wasn't like, this year I've talked, more than I had talked in the previous maybe 10 on it, like literally maybe, because, and that's kind of what happened to me though. I was like taking on a lot of this like new stuff and being kind of present in that, I guess, lifestyle. Whereas before, like I remember a long time ago, like in high school, going to parties, and going to these situations I was uncomfortable with. Like one thing I would do I never really noticed was I would yawn a lot when I got into like these crowds and being around everybody. One of my I don't know how really to describe her, but she kind of helped me through some stuff. She's not necessarily like a healer or anything like that. She just kind of, I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe her role in my life, but she told me like, when you're doing this, what you're doing is you're like taking in like everybody's negative emotions. Like you're kind of siphoning that off of people, and you're, that kind of, I guess, almost a lightning rod for a lot of people's emotions. And like, that's kind of, and it made a lot of sense to me because throughout my life, I'd always kind of felt other people when I was around them. And I just, like, even nowadays, like I can tell when there's like a shift in energy, like people's moods, like they change. I can feel that like right away, like just like right in my chest, I can feel it. So being that kind of person, all my life, like being like real quiet and withdrawn, and then going to this kind of role was a big shock. But I've kind of decided just to embrace it because I'm having a lot of fun doing it. It's new, and it's kind of a career almost that I can actually enjoy. Like before, now it's just been like one job after the next, like just trying to get through the day rather than looking forward to it. So it's been kind of nice. And but I too understand like that, needing like time alone and being by myself. I spent probably all of 2004 and 2000, most of 2005 by myself, because I moved out of town. I went down to Florida, moved to Florida for school, and didn't know anybody there. Wasn't great at making friends. Like I made some friends down there, but for the most part, I spent probably 90% of the time when I wasn't in class by myself. And that became kind of like my lifestyle, and it was hard. It took a while to get out of that, but
so
it's.
I feel like maybe that was the other realm of the balance. Like, I have been around people and I'm always around people often. And so maybe that was just way too much. And for you weren't around as many people maybe. And so
Right.
you needed that other side of it. And that's like basically the yin and the yang in my world. And also when you mentioned the yawn, I don't know if I technically believe what that person was saying, like you're breathing out their stuff. It's not necessarily that in my opinion. When I was working with like sound healing and these type of things in meditation and the Om, there's a yawn basically. The yawn is connected to a chakra. Dawn, do you know which one it is? Like the actual sound it makes is connected to one of the chakras. So that might be, in my opinion, working with the chakras.
It's either, and I might be wrong, but I feel like it's either the throat chakra or the crown chakra. But to me, the yawn is a nervous behavior where you're trying to release tension in your diaphragm that you've been holding. And a lot of times we don't notice we're holding these tensions in our bodies. So if you were in that social situation of a party that you were doing your best to be part of, but also deeply uncomfortable with, then you were probably holding a lot of tension in your body. It was probably making you tired and you were yawning. I used to do it too. That's why unfortunately, I would get quite drunk at parties as a way to medicate, because I didn't realize that I was medicating. But I was like, oh boy, I better just keep drinking and make this better.
Yeah.
And I was the same way. I was actually quite nervous, even though I am outgoing and I speak well to people. It's not my favorite thing to do. I just like to be around a few close friends and have a good time, but big parties would make me sort of nervous. So I think it was really kind of an anxiety type symptom that you were experiencing.
Sure. Well, yeah,
You
like
see
now
it,
looking back at it, yeah, for sure.
yeah. And I hate to make this comparison. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but you see this behavior with dogs too, when there's a lot of yawning or licking. It's really kind of a nervous behavior.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what a lot of it was, because I mean, definitely have dealt with anxiety most, if not all, my life. So I'm sure that had a big part. But I just thought it was an interesting, not maybe necessarily an answer, but an interesting insight into what was going on when I was in these large groups. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I'm sure it was definitely more to do with my anxiety and being uncomfortable and just trying to release some kind of tension. Because I did it almost every time I went to like these large parties. So it's just kind of interesting for me to see, I guess, an explanation for that, where I've never even kind of really thought about it.
Her perspective is definitely interesting. Just from working with the chakras quite a bit. Don, I don't know if you read up a little bit on Seven Healing Stars, but I'm part of a nonprofit that basically works with the chakras. We've done a lot of different things, and we're planning lots of great sustainability projects right now. But it's been a work in progress, because first of all, we knew that we were going to have to work on ourselves first. And so it's been some good stuff came out the last 7 years we've been doing this. And I've been working on myself very deeply, and it takes that to be able to do this type of work.
That's really interesting. That sounds like a whole healing journey in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back to Andrew, what your friend said about your yawning, I think there may be some truth to it in terms of perhaps you were absorbing a lot of the emotions around you, and that was overwhelming for you as well. Because
Yeah.
if you are very energetically open to others, which I think on some level we should be, but when you go to a large party and you're so open in that way, it's easy to be kind of assaulted by everyone's collective energies. And most people that go to parties, I think, are pretty nervous or they're super excited. So it's a high energy situation for sure.
Right.
100% agree with that. Like,
Yeah, definitely.
not negating that you weren't getting these energies, but it was more of like what Dawn was saying before, that it was like blood suckers around you, and you were sucking all their energy. And that's why it's really important to choose your friends wisely and who you put yourself around, even on the computer or a phone, because as Dawn mentions, that the energy can transfer by phone or computer. Right. So it's just the thought and your heart going into it is the biggest thing, I believe.
Right. And I guess my point, a lot of it is just having been quiet pretty much my entire life and not really talking to a lot of people, and unless I'm obviously in a comfortable situation, I spent a lot of time listening and watching. So I've got really good at identifying people's body language and how they carry themselves. So it's that for me is, I think, probably the more important part is the body language. So if I can't see them, like I can't see what they're doing with, like, how they carry themselves. Like, if I can hear the tones in their voices if I'm talking to them, but there's still that whole other element of their mannerisms and how, like I said, how they carry themselves, how they move their arms when they're talking, and all this kind of stuff, their facial expressions, all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, you can get some of that, with video conferencing and the other kind of digital stuff that we have to it. But I guess I don't have a lot of experience doing that, but it's, for me, it's a lot of visual.
That's kind of being like stuck with a physical as well. Like, oh, I have to have them near me. But really, like, if I think about it, my grandpa's been dead since 2012, but I can still tap in and feel his energy. So I think anywhere you go, no matter if you're alive or not, you're still feeling the energy of everyone around you, and your relatives are just closer to you and you realize it more. But we can tap into a lot of different energies. But I feel like we're letting our minds are the barrier from allowing that connection to happen online or over a phone. But you're right. Like, it's powerful to be in one room together as well.
And I think there's some benefit to everyone being on a different level, perceiving people in different ways, where maybe, you and I, Brandon, don't necessarily need to be in the room with somebody to feel their energy. We can feel it from across the planet. But then there's also a lot of benefit to Andrew being able to see, maybe he doesn't even have to hear them speak or see a whole lot. He only needs to be with them for a moment or two to deeply understand them, because he can see so much happening in body language, in the physical energy in front of him. And if you think about a tribe, like we were saying, everyone has a different role. And if we are all healers coming together, then we're all healing each other, ourselves, and the collective in our very own unique way. So there's a lot of benefit to perceiving it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so true. So true. I always tend to only think of my superpowers and forget everyone else has great ones too. We all don't have the same ones. We could tap into them. because
Right.
I believe anything we can't do is just our brain's in the way.
What do they say? Like you can't, if everybody sings the same note, you don't get harmony, or you can't have harmony if everybody's singing the same note.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
So
I need
it
to
kind
remind
of plays into that. Just differences
I need a
are
constant reminder.
better. Yeah.
My ego definitely, I've been working on it, but it definitely gets the best of me when I talk about this stuff. But I know firsthand that it has no part in this world, the ego. But I guess you have to have the ego to realize certain things.
Right.
That's interesting. Where do you guys stand on ego death?
I mean, I've done ayahuasca, so I feel like that helps a lot on ego death. But I don't know, like, if there's, as far as another side to it, is there like two sides? Like, is this a big thing people talk about? Or
It's something that my friends and I talk about. I've crafted a very small circle of friends. My closest friends are all aware in this way that we're talking about. I tend not to want to bring anyone else in that is not on this level or that can't have these conversations. So we discuss ego death, and one or two of my friends will occasionally go through a dark period where they're saying, "Oh, I'm having another ego death," and it's fascinating to me that, like, we have this ego, but yet it keeps dying. Like, how does it keep getting resurrected? And we talked about it briefly on our podcast at one point. And if you hear us, our co-host Nico has very differing opinions from me. And by opinions, I think I mean that he sees the world very differently. And most of what I say or believe in, he refutes. And so when we say, there's more to it than just the ego, there's more to us as a being. We have a consciousness. We have many layers of consciousness. We have a higher self. All this he does not, subscribe to. And he says that he is his ego, and he perceives with his ego and behaves out of his ego and these sort of things. So to me, it's very interesting because he's like, there's no ego death. You can't have an ego death. You would die. And so I just was curious now, because now it makes me kind of question the ego a little bit. And I think I'm seeing it in a new way where we do need our ego. It is important, but it's as important as, say, our inner child, where we don't act out of our inner child's needs 24/7, but it is important to have awareness of our inner child's needs and to hear our inner child saying things like, "Oh, we need to go run in the waves," or, play this old song, or let's do these crafts or something. It can be very grounding and freeing, and there are a lot of lessons to be had. The same way I think the ego is there to teach us and to reflect us back onto ourselves in a way.
100%. That's how I feel about ego death. You said it so perfectly. Yeah, can't beat that. You said it so well. And that's how I believed for a long time. And especially after doing ayahuasca, when I realized I was like Scrooge, going through his Christmas past. I was like in the corner, kind of like if you have a spider web and you're hanging in the corner. I was looking at myself, at my body, and then I was thinking in my head, I was looking at this other kid, and he was like kind of shaking his hands and like doing this spiritual stuff that you would see at like church. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, he's faking it. Like, he's not really, that's how he really feels. And then I'm starting to like work with myself and realize, why am I judging this person? Let him do whatever he wants to do. And that was the work for me. That was what I needed to learn. So he was helping me learn, and I was sitting there judging. That's pretty wild. And we all do this. And I think judgment is part of your ego.
Right.
But you would not have grown out of that that moment unless you were also being the observer of yourself. And
Absolutely.
some people don't take the time to learn how to be the observer of themselves and say, wait, why am I acting this way? Or this isn't right. I shouldn't be having this response according to who I really am. And a lot of times the ego is in charge and the observer is shut down. So you have this ego, yes, to teach you, but unless, like you did, observe yourself and your own behavior and evaluate your ego's reactions, it doesn't really help you or teach you. It just kind of is like a drunk driver almost.
So true. And I've always tried to be the person that learns from other people's mistakes. Because I always love the quote, "Oh, wise man learns from his mistakes, and even wiser men learn from others' mistakes." Uh,
Hmm.
I don't see, I don't see that we have to go through all this pain and trauma. I used to think, and I wrote poetry and all these things on how pain creates beautiful things, and it does sometimes. Dark creates beautiful things, like the lotus flower. It comes from the mud, and it's a beautiful thing when it gets up. But we just tell ourselves that we have to go through pain to get the best, but we really don't have to go through the pain. We just have to learn the lessons that the pain teaches us.
Hmm.
If we can learn those lessons, then we don't have to go through the pain. That's my opinion.
I would
Um,
disagree, but
yeah.
that's me. I think it's necessary just because otherwise you don't have any other perspectives. Like if you only know like joy, that it's not as good when you know pain. Like people say
Well,
that
the lessons.
it's better. Like you don't know like real joy until you felt pain, because after that pain, the joy is just so much stronger and so much more.
I get what
Well,
you're saying, but the lessons are are what you're talking about. So if you can learn those lessons, like you're saying, you can't appreciate it as much if you don't go through the struggle. And I'm saying if you can learn the struggle without going through it, you don't have to go through the struggle because you learned and you understand it at a deep level. What if our past life went through the hardest struggle in the world and we understand it when we're a baby? uh, I just feel like if we just continue, you become what you think about. So if you think you have to go through pain and struggle, then you'll just keep going through it.
Well, I've got a good compromise for you
All right.
that may bridge what both of you are saying, and that is empathy. Because if you have empathy, full, complete empathy with another person, and you have a good teacher, you don't have to go through the pain because you can understand the pain without having to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can come to the lesson without, for instance, okay, so let's use the example of my parents' divorce. My parents got divorced when I was about 7 or 8. And, that was, I mean, I knew at the time it had nothing to do with me. They explained to me, like, this is just, we don't work, we don't get along, this has nothing to do with you. So growing up, of course, my mom would say, oh, don't do this because you don't want to end up in the same situation, and avoid this. And so I became really good at reading people. And even though I went through, a slew of terrible relationships, I was really careful not to get married to anybody because I was afraid of the consequence of that divorce happening, and I wanted to be super sure. So I had the empathy and I had the teacher.
okay, real quick, y'all. This one's going to be another long one, so we got a little bit of an interlude for you, a little bit of music coming your way just to break it up, give you guys a rest, and get it re-energized. We got a great piece coming at you this week. Tell them all about it.
Yeah. Please enjoy Our Brothers with Elephants in Mud from the album Stairwell. The song is called Basement. And I hope you enjoy the Love Revolution.
Yep, you can check them out on Spotify. They are on there. Give it a listen if you like it. They have more.
Yes. Great example.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, like what Brandon was saying though. Because there are plenty of situations where I'd feel the pain that people are feeling, even though I've never experienced that situation. But at the same time, somebody has to, I feel like, but not everybody should have to. If there's, a good enough teacher, I guess, out there to do that.
One thing I want to add before I forget, because I do forget easily, is that the thing in my world that solidifies these lessons are when you go through it in the other shoe. So I'm trying to think of an example, but I guess when you see someone else get their foot run over and they're like, even before they're like attracting this thing, they're like, oh, more, just like all this crazy energy, and you see their foot run over, and you did this 10 years ago and you went through this exact same thing, and you see these people going through it and kind of attracting more and more. You just basically say, oh, like a light bulb clicks, and you're like, that's why I kept doing that, because I was stuck in this mode of attracting this bad stuff. And I think when those light bulbs go off on the other shoe is when you really learn that lesson deeply, or remember the lesson deeply, because I think we always we come with all the knowledge. We're just remembering it.
I think that kind of goes back to what Andrew was saying too, about how we all experience things differently, and somewhere somebody is going through the pain, then everyone else sees it. Just, go back to that tribal setting where everyone is learning at a different pace, but the one person ends up with the thorn in their foot, and the other people are going, ow, that looks terrible, I have to be really careful around that plant. And then, the one person took the pain and shared it with everyone, essentially. So everyone kind of goes through the pain a little bit themselves, because we know what it feels like to have something stuck in our foot, but we're not living it in that moment. Only the one person is living it, but we're all living it vicariously with them and sharing the pain and the lesson.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's like seeing someone hit themselves with a hammer and you went yourself or kicked in the nuts. It's like, wow, that hurts.
I really can only imagine. I don't know.
Yeah, you probably get that. I don't know if women get the same feeling as men when we see it, because we like, this is a great example. Like, Dawn, do you get that feeling like when you see this maybe on TV or in person, and do you get like, oh, or is it like,
it's
that
kind
hurts,
of like it's a similar feeling to me of like if you smack your shin or some other very sensitive, like skin on bone type part of you against something really solid. I imagine that's what it feels like based on the level of pain that I can see on the person. The dude essentially that is getting kicked in the balls, or when they fall off their BMX bike right onto the bar, and it still hurts. Like, I think also, I don't know, I'm probably really different from a lot of people, but maybe this is similar, because when I see or know of someone else's pain, I absolutely feel it in my own body. And a lot of times I feel the pain before I know what's happening. And so I've had instances where, for instance, I used to work with an older lady who was the receptionist at my job. And I come into work that day, and I walked past her at some point to get to my desk, and my throat was hurting so bad, and I could not figure out why, because moments before it had been fine. So I was like, what's going on with my throat? And then she came past me and she said, hey, I have to run out. Can you watch the phone for me for a little bit? I have a doctor's appointment. I have this terrible pain in my throat. And so I was like, oh, it's you. It's not me. And I think that happens a lot with me when I see somebody get injured too. It's a whole other level. So if you've heard in our podcast before, I don't watch violent videos or even read violent books or anything like that, because it's really hard for me to process it. And it's gotten worse as I'm getting older. I mean, when I was younger, it was not really an issue, or maybe I was blocking it out, but it's really bad now. And we were talking in one episode about serial killers and the traumas that they underwent as children, and then the kind of people they grew up into, and then the types of murders and everything. And I was in so much pain in that episode that I talked about, where the pain was located in my body and what was happening. And then as I talked about it, and as we sort of shifted the conversation away from the more gruesome topics, it kind of eased off. And by the end of the recording session, the pain was gone.
That's interesting. I've never liked horror movies either. I feel like it's just putting things in your mind that you shouldn't really have. I do like learning about like old serial killers to see the mind, but sometimes it definitely gets like too much. And I've never thought about it like as far as like the pain in your side or whatever it may be, but I guess that transference is very possible, and like you said, it happened to you, so that's wild.
I learned early on about this when I was pregnant with my first child, and I took a hypnobirthing course with my husband. And in the course, they talk about the power of words on the mind, and it's really kind of shocking when you start to realize, like, in the hypnobirthing world, you don't use the word contraction, you call it a wave, because you associate this contraction with pain. And the idea is in hypnobirthing to have a pain-free delivery, and to have a pain-free labor. And so they don't say pain and they don't say contractions, they say waves and they say uncomfortable. And even though I did not have what I would call a pain-free labor and delivery, I would say that it was uncomfortable. And I'm now on my third pregnancy, so it's obviously not stopped me. I did have both of my children, with no pain medicines, because I didn't believe in that. I still don't believe in that. And I think that that type of pain, if you want to call it that, is an incredibly important part of the human experience, and of the experience of being a woman, becoming a mother, having the child. Because what that feeling does is it really transports you to a different place, where you can almost say you kind of leave your body and you go to the place of souls, and you bring this child back with you. So wow. It's incredibly important to me to be fully aware of what's going on in my body. And that's why the first time I had my baby, I was on my back, which is not a good birthing position, but it's one that is encouraged by OBs, which are actually trained surgeons. So when I switched to midwives for my second child, I was given better treatment because I was allowed to birth in any position that I deemed fit at the time. I was able to listen to my body and do what I needed to do with the support of them, just making sure that I was okay the whole time. And so I gave birth on my knees the second time and allowed gravity to help me. And it was very innate, very intuitive, and I was very present. Whereas with my first birth, I was very much out of body and somewhere else for a lot of it. But when I was there, I was also gaining a lot of ancestral knowledge. And when I returned present to my body, I had this deep sense that all the women who had come before me, every single woman to ever have lived, had gathered together to tell me that they had done it and I could do it too. I felt that very deeply. So I think pain is incredibly important to go through sometimes.
Totally. Yeah, we wouldn't have the appreciation, like Andrew was saying, and I think the power of words. You're right. With weight, I've had a weight battle all my life. And Greg Braden, do you know who that is?
No.
He's all about the heart. So like saying things from the heart and what you mean. And I just thought about this thing when I heard that. I was like, why do we always think lose weight. Like when you lose something, you're not very happy when you lose something. Besides weight, but technically we always relate it to losing your watch or losing your wallet. So I always like to look at it as gaining health, and I'm not totally there yet, but it's a better roadmap than trying to lose something and feel better about it.
That's a big shift.
Yeah. So I think the power of words, and we were talking about like murder shows, and yeah, it can definitely have an effect on you.
Yeah, that's why in the birth community we don't tell birth horror stories like, oh my god, my birth was so bad, this XYZ happened to me. And that's not to discredit the women that do go through trauma, but there is a time and a place for that to be expressed, and they should have the access to the proper support and healing that they deserve. But in terms of pregnant women, when a woman is pregnant, you do not tell her horror stories about birth. You don't.
Got
And
it.
it's absolutely a shame that Hollywood portrays women in birth as this like screaming in agony and like she's dying, because it's really not accurate at all. I mean, yes, it's uncomfortable, and yes, there is yelling, but it's more of like a roar. It's more of like coming from a deep place of power to do something that is immeasurable and can't even be described really unless you've seen it or felt it, because it's like when you know, the common story about the child gets run over by the car or something, and so the parent sees it and lifts the car off the child. It's like superhuman, and no one knows where this strength comes from. It just happens. And that's the same about giving birth. And when you tell these horror stories or you portray women as being weak in this way, then you rob women of knowing their own power. So the words are incredibly important.
Yeah. Andrew, were you in the room for your daughter's birth?
I was present the entire labor.
That's awesome, brother.
Yeah, we had we also worked with a midwife. We were going to do a whole big thing with the birthing center, but complications arose to a point where we had to actually, our midwife suggested that we go to the hospital just in case, so you can have like those extra resources on hand because of complications that were going on during the time. So yeah, it was quite the experience. It was definitely, I think, a lot better because we didn't do like the whole Lamaze thing, like just, you know, the whole breathe. It was like the class we went through was way more holistic, way more in tune with what the body is going through as it's, you know, undergoing this transformation basically, or this passage. So that was really actually really awesome to go through, and because I was there every step of the way with it.
That's cool, man. I've never been through that process, but Scotty told me an interesting story about his son. His son was like 2.5 pounds or so, very premature, and he was born not breathing, and I guess he had something in the back of his throat that they had to get out. And as soon as he was born, my brother said that my brother passed out as soon as his son was born. And well, as soon as his son took his first breath, my brother passed out. Scotty told me that was part of his soul, like sending help to his son in a way. And I'm not going to negate anything because I've never been in that experience or that position.
Wow, that's very emotional.
It is. It is. He was emotional when he was talking about it, and it's incredible.
Scott's always been kind of that way, though.
Yeah, he's been very spiritual. He's told us he's seen angels and things like that, and I totally believe it. I think he wouldn't make up anything like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Right. I forget. I don't know if this was actually a thing that happened, but you remember, I guess, back when I got in the accident, Didn't you guys go down to the hospital at
Yeah.
all?
Yeah.
Didn't something happen with Scott when he was down there? Or no? Am I like
right.
something?
I can't remember specifics, Andrew, but I think you're right.
Didn't he? I feel like he like kind of almost passed out then too, or something like that.
Possibly. And also, like, right when it happened, I was like kind of like meditating on you guys. It was really wild. It's like Dawn was saying before, like you can transfer these energy and thoughts without even talking to you. Like I thought it was so weird that like I was thinking about calling you right then, and then that happened at the very same time. But that's what we're talking about, is you can talk to each other through telepathy from being way far away.
Wow.
Right.
That's what you might have been doing during that time.
Yeah, maybe. I remember some kind of story like closer to when it happened, like it came out something like that. Like, so I feel like it's had something to do with Scott. It just him. I've always been kind of, intrigued by Scott and how he lives his life and the things that he experiences.
Yeah.
So I feel like he experiences things on a way different level than a lot of people do.
Yeah, he's a very unique person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he is that type of person that acts from his heart. He always has been.
Yep.
He's always told me, take the good with the bad and the bad with the good. And, that's just, but yeah, the mind is a powerful thing.
Oh yeah. I agree. It's kind of interesting though. We were just talking about the other night. We're like just last night. We were talking about murder porn, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
we were just talking about that because my wife is huge on that stuff. Like she's like, but she likes it more for the psychology of it, like how these people think and how like these murderers like think and how they got to be who they are and what
right,
and like what in their life transpired to get them to that point where they're just like taking out like these horrific acts. And I always think that's absolutely an interesting thing to kind of want to delve into. Like for me it's a little bit harder to get into just because of especially when they get in like real deep to that stuff. Like it just makes me super uncomfortable because I always like when they're like talking about these things, I just always have to picture it. Like I can't help myself, but it's just like it just comes up as pictures in my brain, and like then I start putting myself in those situations of how those people feel or people close to them, how they feel. Like I'm always kind of putting myself in that, so like it weighs a lot on me because it just like makes me sad and makes me like afraid and stuff like that. So I try to stay away from it as here as much as possible, but every once in a while I'll catch glimpses or catch like snippets of what she's listening to or watching. But I think that's always interesting how people are, just the mindset and all that is, it's just for most people impossible to fathom. And so it's an interesting topic for people to explore.
We talked about that on one of our podcast episodes, and it was a little bit about that morbid fascination of people just being so drawn to these serial killers and being intrigued about the way that their mind works. And my point in that show was that yes, it's good to try to understand, but it's not good to glorify to the point of like, wow, oh my gosh, amazing. But rather we should use them as examples of what we don't want in our society. What we don't want for our children and that kind of thing.
Well, one thing is like we teach our kids everything. They learn from us. So like we even teach them failure. So like we were saying before, like the words are very powerful. So you don't want to imprint this stuff on them like so young, and then they grow up like that's the only thing they know. And instead maybe expose them to much more loving things so they can flourish that way. That's at least my perspective from not being a father.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of it, that's kind of what a lot of it is. A lot of people like to see where that comes from so they can kind of get to the root of the cause and be like, how do we stop this going forward? Like what is the commonality between these people, or is there a common theme, or is there like relation, like things that are related? Yeah. Like what is happening in particular in these lives that can be avoided in future generations so we can, maybe work this kind of behavior out of society as a whole, because obviously it's very unwanted and it's not something people want to deal with, and but it's just something that nobody really understands. So a lot of people are trying to kind of get to the root
Well, I can
of
tell
the
you
issue.
from our research, what we found the commonalities to be were a lack of empathy and often head trauma early
Mhm.
on. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you see a lot of psychopath type behavior among prison populations. So, there are a lot of, you know, you got to think of like poverty, broken homes, physical abuse. These things actually lead to this type of behavior if it's bad enough. And some people are born more predisposed for these things. And then, given the right, or I should say wrong environment, they really turn and start to act out because they don't have the empathy, they don't have the compassion to say, okay, this is not right what I'm doing. Because in general, when we hurt somebody, we hurt ourselves, and people that don't feel that are more likely to commit these kinds of crimes and end up on true crime or Netflix or whatever.
And
Right.
that's why it's really important to kind of talk about what we have been talking about for the past hour and a half or so, is to connect with yourself. Because if you're connecting with yourself and people, then you'll be more apt to have this empathy for people. But if you disconnect, that's usually when these type of things happen. Um, so
So, in
having
terms of bringing it way back to the beginning, the internet, right? We're connecting to other people in the way that we want to connect to other people physically, but we're doing the internet as a way of connecting to them wherever they are. Do you think that there's a way to use the internet to help us connect to ourselves the way that we need to, that maybe we're missing out on?
I do. It's all about what we put out there. So if we have like a website with full of knowledge and great information and love, instead of all this hate that's we get so easily on Facebook and every other platform, we just need to give as much love as there is hate and balance that out. And whether it be the internet, in person, wherever you are, if the love is overpowering the hate, then we're doing something good.
Right. I think, yeah, I'm kind of in agreement. So it's a lot of, because the internet itself isn't inherently, the issue. It's a tool, and a lot of the times it's how you use the tool. It's not how the tool is designed. Like you get out of it what you put into it, right? So if I think it is possible to get all that kind of stuff out of the internet, but like I said, with it being as relatively new as it is, we're still trying to figure out how to do that. But I think we're kind of starting to come around to how we can utilize this vast network to kind of make the message more positive and get like reconnect with people. And then once we get to that point and connect with ourselves, then we can figure out how we're connecting to other people on that same level. It's gonna, I think, with anything, it's just gonna take time and maybe a lot of what was it, ego deaths, maybe a lot of those going on. So,
Yeah.
so I think it's possible. On obviously on a long enough timeline, anything's possible. It just what happens in the meantime, and just if it doesn't, it's going to get worse before it gets better, just like most things. I think that's what we have to kind of brace for, and then just kind of I guess wade through that through the worst, and then kind of start to gather the light and embrace on the better stuff on the other side.
I feel like we're already in the better.
Could be,
because the knowledge is exposed. All these things that we weren't really paying attention to, people are starting to pay attention to, and that's when the good happens.
I think.
It's
Yeah,
just
I think was it like the paradigm of it, or the paradoxical nature of it? It's going to be with the internet, everything is instantaneous, but the change is going to be not instantaneous. It's going to take time. It's going to be like a process, an evolution, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be like this instant gratification thing where, oh, there's that big change. It's like an explosion. It's not going to be an explosion. It's going to be like just like the tide coming in. Pretty much, like you don't notice it, but suddenly there it is.
What you think you become, right?
Right.
So if you think it is going to be this amazing, easy switch, then it might be.
Human history has proven otherwise.
Because we thought otherwise.
I mean, you can't. Yeah, I mean, you can't control human nature and the way people are. You can control yourself and hope that people follow you.
Yeah.
But there's still an inherent thing within all people, because it's just something that we've become disconnected with because we don't have that kind of connection to the natural world as much as we used to.
Mm-hmm. That natural process has been removed, or we've removed it. We've stepped away from it a bit, but I like to think that we've not stepped as far away as we think we have, because look at COVID and the lockdown, right? And look at the amount of shifting that has occurred even just this year. This has been such a monumental year for everyone. Not one single person has been unaffected by this. Everyone has gained a new perspective, and everyone has had to make changes. Except for, a handful of homesteaders in West Virginia whose lives have gone on the way that they were because they're completely self-sufficient.
Or the Amish.
Or the Amish.
The Amish.
I think honestly that the Amish have benefited quite a bit, because when there was a yeast shortage in the grocery stores, the Amish still had the yeast and were selling it. They made out really well in all of this. But I think my point is just that this all comes at a moment in our collective where we have become, I want to say, fed up. It's a tipping point from being so fed up with the way that things have been and wanting for so long a better future, that suddenly we were on the precipice of being able to make these changes and had the clarity as to how to go forward with it. Hence, like you were saying, this new wave of podcasters that all are talking about very similar subjects, and we're all trying to find new ways to communicate with each other that don't involve shouting over others or belittling each other, but instead have a type of productive discourse where we all learn, even though we have such differing opinions. We learn that we can come together at the table to each take something away from it without taking from each other or hurting each other. And that has to be part of this next wave of, I don't want to call it evolution, but maybe some sort of energetic ascension where we're moving to a new level together for a totally different future now. And it's happening right now.
I love energetic ascension. I really do love that. It's exactly that. We came together energetically, and there's just a common goal among us, I believe, and I'm sure a lot more will come that will be like, wow, yeah, we're all like-minded, and kind of bounce off each other and have each other on and create this bigger community. There's a million podcasts out there, but I want to be one that just spreads good things.
It's also important to make sure that we're not too like-minded, and good to have differing opinions and learn. I mean, I think that's a big part of why this is happening, is because we are all so different. And we have people on our panel, on our own podcast, that have such different opinions from each other. but we have such fun conversations trying to work out what one person means and how another person is interpreting it. And I feel like almost every recording that we do, we all grow a little bit in our own way. And I'd have to say that's the whole point of podcasting, because you don't get the same effect on radio and you don't get the same effect in TV because of all the paid advertisement reasons that we know. And we're moving away from that as a generation. Most people, you know, millennials and underneath, they don't even buy cable anymore because why?
Yeah.
Right.
Half the
They're
time
still trying to get us to buy it, though.
What'd you say, Andrew?
Said they're still trying to get us to buy it, though. You're just going to call it by a different name.
It's always shifting.
I was kind of in the same like mindset, because there's like this whole, if you believe in it, like if you buy into it, there's a whole like shared human experience. Like there's like kind of this one, basically like a river of energy that we all drink from, we all pull from. It just depends on who's actually pulling from it and how they interpret it. And I think that's kind of where we need to be mindful of, just that people will just, we experience the same situations, but everybody gets different things out of it. So doing these podcasts is a natural way to get that, get those experiences out there. It's like, oh yeah, I've dealt with this before, but here's this person just like who's completely different from me. He experienced the same thing, but in a different way. So it's like my view isn't the only one that's out there, but there are similar experiences that are being shared amongst us. And that's kind of like the thing where, I might have an idea, but someone, halfway or all the way across the country has this exact same idea. Like there's just this collective, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't want to call it like a hive, but it's like,
I think that's like string theory. You probably know better, Dawn.
Yeah. It's something like that. Where just like, we are on like this, I don't know, kind of like the shared existence.
We're vibing.
That we don't, that we don't quite fully understand yet, or at least not anymore, not like we used to.
We're all tapping into the same cloud.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you see, because a lot of the things I look a lot at is the knowledge of like ancient cultures, Mayans and Aztecs and those kind of people who they had like this immense knowledge base and just stuff that we can't even recreate like today with all the technology. And that might be the actual hindrance of the things we can't recreate, because we're not relying on the natural world around us like they had to. So I like looking at those cultures a lot too, because they just had this whole other understanding of how life is, and they were really connected to everything that was around them. So I think those were important lessons for us to keep in mind and learn from.
I think that's why there's so much emphasis on the ancient alien theory, because we don't know how else to explain how the heck they did some of the things that they did. Like someone must have helped them who knows better and can do stuff, even though like there's no real reason that they couldn't do it. There's this idea that 1,000 years ago, people were not as smart as they are today. And we can see from architecture and all kinds of technologies that they had and recorded that is simply not true. They just did things differently. Right. We've not changed a whole lot in terms of how we think and feel, as a machine, as a biological machine. We just changed the way we go about it. And that creates a lot of mystery in the world, right? I mean, how did they make their crops and their buildings and all this, sustaining their civilizations that are now lost, and we can't even ask them.
Right. They had to rely much more on what they had around them or what they had to work with. Like even like somehow back before there were like satellites up in space looking at the Earth, like they were able to accurately define the circumference of our planet. Like without machines and all that kind of stuff. They did it. Like they have these records, and it was to the I don't know, like a couple decimal points, so they got it accurately. And there's not many people who could actually still do that today, but they just used what they had and the knowledge around them and the tools that were given to them by, I guess, nature, if you want to put it that way.
I think there's another layer here, though. Are you familiar with Seth as a non-physical entity, as described by the author Jane Roberts in the 70s?
I am not.
Okay, so there's a book that you should both read that you will love, and it's called The Nature of Personal Reality. And in the 70s, this woman, Jane Roberts, and her husband were very much into meditation, and they had a meditation center, and they were guiding others and stuff. So they were real deep in it, and they were doing this every day. And Jane was contacted by a non-physical entity who described himself as Seth. And Seth would use Jane as a channel and speak through her to her husband, and her husband would write everything down. Basically, Seth said, I'm going to dictate books for you, and you write them. And there is a ton of knowledge. I mean, essentially, the title of the book says it all: The Nature of Personal Reality, how we create our own reality and why, and all kinds of examples from history that we can use to understand things like schizophrenia and Jesus, and just everything is in there. It's kind of really enlightening. And then the other example that I want to bring into this is the example of Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you're aware of Esther Hicks.
Very much.
Yeah. Okay. So she channels Abraham. Abraham is actually a group of non-physical entities in the same way as Seth. So this leads me to believe that these ancient cultures were probably channeling their own ancestors in the way that you said, Brandon, where you can still feel the energy of your grandfather. These ancient peoples were obviously much more connected to their natural world, and therefore were probably more spiritual than we are as a whole. So I wonder if they generally were receiving ancestral knowledge directly from the other side.
Oh, 100%. That's a great perspective. I actually believe that too. Have you heard of another channeler called Bashar?
Mm-mm.
He's more of like an alien type of sounding, but he's like located out of Sedona. He does similar things as Abraham, goes around and brings people together. And he's very interesting too. I definitely recommend him if you like Abraham Hicks. And I think I've heard of the Seth one as well. Just I know Abraham Hicks and Bashar much better, but channeling is very important for us. And in my opinion, you can look at it as woo or whatever, but if it resonates with you, then why wouldn't you? Why isn't it good if it resonates and makes you feel better? Then that's all that really matters.
Mm-hmm. And the important knowledge that comes from these otherworldly entities, that not only does it teach us that there's more to us than just our biological body, but it also teaches us to open our mind to the other side and consider this. And we talked, about how energy is not really lost or gained, and it's not really tied to space and time the way we think. So it doesn't seem far-fetched that somebody from the other side might say, hey, here's a little tip for your technology or what you're trying to achieve. Do this, and this will help you.
Yeah, and especially if they're the future and they're future us trying to help their past. Who knows?
Yeah.
They could be our ancestors saying, hey guys, watch out, you might blow up your world if you keep using nukes.
Yeah.
They usually show up. Alien encounters are usually near nuclear plants, nuclear nukes, military. It's usually around nukes.
Yeah.
So I really believe they're trying to keep the cat in the bag and let us know, love is better than fighting.
It depends on the entities, right? I mean, I have definitely seen the majority of my UFOs around an army base, which most people would say, oh, it was just army equipment or whatever that I saw, but it definitely was not. But then also when I was a reporter and I was interviewing, I interviewed all the World War II veterans in my town. And
Whoa.
yeah, that was a whole other thing. That's for a different podcast.
Much respect to them,
Every time
by
I
the way.
got with a pilot, I would say, so did you see anything weird when you were up in the sky? And every single time they said, oh, yeah, all the time. And we were not to talk about it.
Whoa.
So, I mean,
Wow.
what are they called? The Foo Fighters. They would fly beside the planes, and sometimes they would disarm them.
Right? I've heard a lot of wild stuff. The Bob Lazar stuff that's came out recently is totally wild, and I like to believe it first, and then people can prove me wrong. I don't go around like spreading all my beliefs, but it's cool to think about sometimes. And why would we think we're the only ones that figured this out?
Well, and I would just want to make one point that definitely ties in with all this, but I don't actually believe that aliens are extraterrestrial, as to say they come from a different planet, even though that is highly likely, and there could be some that do. I think that on our specific planet, we have many dimensions that overlap and different realities that are here. They're all here, and I think that most of them come from different realities within this sort of physical space that we're in. And I think the physical space that we're in is much more complicated than we think. It's not just this round ball floating in nothingness around these other balls of stuff. I think that there are different realities, different levels of dimensions here on Earth, if we shall say it that way, and that they live in these other dimensions and they travel. It would be easier to travel from one dimension to the other than it would be to travel across the galaxy, which we already know by science and astral projection, which I don't know if you guys saw. The CIA recently released some documents saying that astral projection was real and they had used it to spy on the Russians.
Oh my god!
Why is no one talking about this?
It's incredible. My friend who's a psychiatrist showed me that, and he's like, "This is it!" Like, and no one else was saying anything, and it's just so wild.
Yeah, I have a friend who is really, really, really good at astral projection, and we've been talking about it. And my last question to this friend was, hey, if you could, do you think that it would be possible for you to go to a place where an alien race lives and exists? And he was like, yeah, sure, I can go anywhere I can imagine. And if I can imagine it, I can go there. And then the next thing that pops up is this CIA astral projection experiment where they spied on the Russians. And I was like, that's what they're using it for? That's kind of lame.
Yeah.
They could be like going.
Russians aren't that interesting.
Cool.
Right.
Well,
Get us some answers on energy and using our resources. Get out of it. Who cares about Russia? Jeez.
Yeah.
that definitely came out as like remote viewing too. Like all these people were coming out saying they were assets for remote viewing, and that's basically what they were doing as well. Astral projecting is similar to remote viewing.
I've always been super interested in that. I've dabbled a little bit, never been able to do anything with it, but I've never committed to it. But I always found that to be an incredibly interesting, like, I don't know, topic or experience. I don't know what you would call it, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing to do, apparently. A lot of discipline, probably a lot like meditation.
One time when I was doing DMT, I basically saw an alien type of being, and to me it felt like a being, and like you were saying, Don, it was just tapping into a different realm. I'm not saying everybody needs to use drugs to get here. Like you said, if you're super clean eating and things like that, you can get there naturally, if you want. But I basically just met this being. I was super afraid, but it was when I meditated on my third eye. And then as soon as I like let that door open, I was into this room with this being, and it was like coming at me, and I was really scared. So I opened my eyes and I was totally out of it. And then I was like, wait, I want to meet you. So I went back. I tried to go back and close my eyes, but nothing happened. And it's basically like that time I lost my chance. Maybe I'll have another chance to meet him again. But
It's like a dream.
later on, I read it in a book that you're supposed to like let them jump into your heart and you're supposed to jump into theirs. And then as soon as you do that, it metaphorically speaking, but
That sounds freaky.
it was very, very, and that's why I was so scared. This was at my early ages of trying DMT. So when I had this experience, it was very powerful stuff. But when I had this experience, I was maybe not ready for a full, like jumping into the body type of thing. But there was a name for it. I can't remember, but for this specific being. So aliens might be just evolved beings that we don't have a name for. They could still be related to us,
Yeah.
like we were saying.
Right.
Yeah. I've had some strange alien experiences myself. I don't know if this is getting too far off topic, but
No, go ahead.
when I was 5 years old, I was staying with my nanny for the day, and she had this backyard area around a pond that was sort of secluded from like the porch area of the house. So it was like you stepped out the back door, and then there was the porch area, and there were hedges, and you had to like kind of go around the hedges to go into that backyard. Otherwise you wouldn't really see it. So I was out there. It was summer. I walked out there by myself. I distinctly remember having the sense of like a longing of wanting to go there and like a curious feeling. And typically I didn't go by myself, but I was getting to a point where they had started to let me go by myself and it was okay. And so I was walking back there, and I go around the corner of the hedges, and there's like a pond, and it's just like a lawn in like an enclosed type area. And as I'm walking, I look up and I realize that there are these three, what I thought were bugs. And they were sort of, I mean, they were green, and they looked like a cross between what I would now call like a praying mantis and a horse. So they were about 3 feet tall, and there were three of them. And I stopped because I was like, I've never seen anything like this before. So I was briefly curious. And then they turned and looked at me. They noticed that I was there as well. And it was sort of like viewing wildlife. But then all three of them, once they saw me and became aware of me, they turned and looked at each other. And then all three of them turned their attention back to me and started heading my way. So, being 5 years old, I completely freaked out and I ran like hell back into the house. I didn't go into the backyard again for like a few weeks probably. Didn't tell anyone because I knew right away nobody would believe me, because if I'd never seen anything like this or heard about anything like this, then they probably would think I was making it up. And I stuffed it away until I was in my 20s. And at that point, I started to become very curious because I had seen a few UFOs and I was very drawn to praying mantises. And this memory resurfaced, and I thought, okay, am I making this up? Did this really happen to me as a child? Because it seems vivid enough that it feels like a memory, but I wasn't totally sure. So my friends and I went to visit a psychic, a very powerful psychic. She still does readings. She's one of the most incredible people I've ever met. And I had this question for her, and I was pretty vague about it. And I just wanted to know if what I had seen was real. And she said that, yes, in fact, it was real, and that I had some of their DNA inside of me. And I drew the picture for her of what I had seen, and I held it to her, and she said, oh, I know this. My friend's dog saw this in their yard and wanted me to tell her. And at that exact moment, her friend walked through the door, And she held up the picture and she said, "Hey, look at this." And she was like, "Oh, it's those green creatures." And they were all like, "Oh, yeah, we totally know about this." And I was like, "What the hell?"
Wow.
And
Have you heard? Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Uh, uh, Cosmic Disclosure. Have you heard of that show?
No.
It's very like, we don't know if it's real or not, but it's Corey Good and David Wilcock, and they talk about praying mantis aliens.
Oh, shit.
So you might want to look into that.
Definitely.
I'm not saying they're the perfect people to listen to, but it's cool to relate.
That's very interesting. I've since then I've become very outspoken about it because in meditation I've been able to contact them again. I actually had a second experience with them when I was in my 20s, my mid 20s. Let's see, I was engaged to my husband, so I was probably about 26. This was right before we got married, and it was your very typical experience. Like, I've read so many of these experiences now that it's really kind of comforting. I was laying in bed, and it was very early in the morning, and I woke up and I felt like I couldn't move. But I wasn't scared or anything. I was just kind of like confused. And I noticed that at the foot of the bed were two of these aliens. One was the mantis alien in a robe, like a brown robe. And the other was what you would typically associate as one of these gray aliens, the short gray with the round head. And they were standing there talking about me. And I knew this because I could hear them inside my head. And I could hear the language was made up of these like clicks. And I could understand it, but I could not tell you what they were saying. I knew that I could understand it, but I couldn't translate it into words, and I wasn't thinking very clearly. I was just kind of observing them as they were discussing me.
From what I know, they speak telepathically, so that makes perfect sense.
Right. And then after a while, I noticed that they were gone, and I could slowly start to move again, but I could hear that conversation going on for the rest of the day. It started to fade around sunset that day, and it was really weird. So ever since then, I've been very open about my experience because I'm kind of desperate for knowledge, and I want to find other people who've had this experience. But I also want other people to know that it's okay to talk about it, because we need to share this knowledge in order to learn more about them and find each other. And I have since made some friends across the world in different places who have had similar experiences with these mantis aliens, because from what I've read, these encounters are quite rare with these specific beings. And the similarities between myself and these other people are really very interesting, in the sense of we've been world travelers since we were growing up, and we're not totally sure where we call home, and we speak multiple languages, and we're very sensitive, intuitive, and we're all healers.
Yes.
So it's weird.
One thing you said rings to me is you were in bed and kind of felt like you couldn't get up. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I was immobile.
Like, was it like a pressure on your chest almost? Like someone was sitting on your chest?
No, it was more like I couldn't wake my body up to listen to me to move.
Okay. I've heard other people talk about how they are like laying in bed and they just feel a pressure, like they can't get up. Maybe it's something similar. They're just not, I'm not understanding it the same way they're saying it.
I've read that too.
That's never happened to me. But other people told me like they woke up every hour on the hour. Even the person that, the people that do our song, and the guy that wrote it, his name is Jared. He was one of the people who felt this pressure, and he has a cool song about it, but I forget the name of the song. I'm gonna reach out and find that. But yeah, I think I've heard that more and more, that like people get visited in the middle of the night, and especially the late hours, like 3 o'clock and so. And I've read that that's a very spiritual kind of opening up to that realm type of hour. It's a wild thing. And thank you for sharing that with us. And I think as you do talk about it, more and more people will come out and say, hey, I had that too. I was just afraid to talk about it. So we're helping people just by talking about our experiences.
I agree. And thank you for giving me this platform to share these things with, because they are hard subjects to talk about. But I feel that the more I talk about them, the more I can find new ways to say the same thing over and over. And that helps this message resonate with a larger crowd more so.
100%.
Yep, for sure.
I am in agreement with you for a lot of this podcast. I'm definitely this has been a great conversation. We're nearing 2 hours, so maybe we can start concluding. And I just have one more question for you, if Andrew doesn't have any more. And I would love to have you on again, of course, if you're willing.
Sure.
But my last question is just, what's your message to the world, and what can we, what's the first thing we can do to better ourselves and in turn everyone around us?
I love this question so much because it's so simple to me that we need to put the phone down and shut the TV off and close our computers and go outside and feel nature around us and feel how the earth holds our feet up and supports us, and allow ourselves to be present in the moment. That's the one thing that we've been given, is to be present in the moment. And I think that connects to the larger question of why are we here? And we're here to experience this reality and to know that it's a sacred moment for us in this space-time continuum that we've created together. And we're here together. Nothing we do is done alone. So we have to reconnect to the planet fully and then reconnect to each other and know that the love that we have for each other is the most important thing that there is.
That's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It's
like that.
One step at a time, right?
Yeah.
Just be that shining light, and maybe someone will see it and get inspired. And I think that's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm sure we could go on for many more hours. And we'll be friends in this podcast world for as long as we can, I believe.
I believe so too, and I think we're gonna be sending each other some links and some videos. And good luck editing this.
Oh, this has been a great one. We only have one edit, and I already have it written down.
No, it should be a good one. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks again just for coming out. Hopefully get together again.
I appreciate you both
continue the
very much,
conversation.
and I loved hearing your perspectives on all these topics. And I feel a sort of brotherhood that we're all in this together, truly. So thanks again for having me and for listening to me and giving me another platform to share my messages and my weirdness with the world. So thanks for that, and thanks for sharing your weirdnesses with me. I really appreciate that.
Likewise, Dawn, and let's not let anybody forget your guys' amazing podcast called Psyche-Delic Podcast. Is that correct? Did I say it right?
That's the Psyche-Delic Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/the Psyche-Delic Podcast. We are on Instagram. We are on every podcast platform that you can find. And we also have a WordPress blog, as well as a Redbubble shop where you can buy our merchandise. And a Patreon if you want to sponsor us and have access to even more weirdness.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Well, send us those links and we'll be happy to put them on the description.
Will do. Thank you so much, guys. It's been really great, and I hope you have a good rest of your weekend.
You too, Dawn. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. That's the end of that conversation. That was a really good one. Again, thank you so much for listening. You can always find us on social media. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on getting on YouTube. I think we're going to work our way up there. But we're also on all kinds of different channels for podcasts: Spotify, Apple, Google, a bunch of other stuff, Anchor, and yeah. So definitely come check us out. Search us by Diametric Convergence. Again, that is the easiest way to find us because not many are named like us. And you can also email us with any comments or questions at diametricconvergence@gmail.com.
Yeah, and just want to thank Dawn once again for coming on. It was such a pleasure speaking with her about an array of subjects. Definitely go and check them out. The Psyche-Delic Podcast on all platforms. And they definitely have a Patreon too, so please give them some love. And next week we'll have another great guest. Her name is Jo, and we'll be talking about many great adventurous things. So thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, have a great one.